Hey, welcome guys. Hello. Here we are, Kirana. As I say here in the Cook Islands. Namaste. Chat with Matt. Here it is. It's the 12th or something, 13th maybe of July. Over here or somewhere in the world. It's about that. So half an hour chat with Matt. I'm a bit late, so I apologise for that. And I have no inspiration. As in, no one's written any question or request in on the little notification that I popped out 12 hours ago or so. So I'm freeform here. Hopefully I managed to get myself into the right group and I'm on the Bright Light Client. No, not the Bright Light Client, the Bright Light Beings Facebook group. And we're here to talk about whatever any of you would like to talk about. Been dancing with two topics a lot this week, both, hey Sister Jane, both the new moon topic of empowered emotional relationship with ourselves, or a more empowered relationship with our emotional being is probably a better way of just saying that, and moving through that progression of releasing a lot of difficulty we have with dealing with our emotional states, whether that be wanting to suppress and deny our emotions, or whether that being overrun by our emotions. And I'm also dealing with the topic for the month of July in the Mantara Transformation Empowerment Support Community with labels and expectations, and working with how we've, take on these labels, or how we apply labels, both sides of the equation, with how we work with labels as the human intellect, and why we do that, and why it creates again a disempowered relationship and limits our ability to really interact with life in a more empowered, natural, authentic, beneficial way. So yeah, lots of thinking about that. I've also been contemplating, as I put a post on yesterday, about boredom and being more inactive and allowing ourselves, boredom, quote unquote. It's, as a lot of people commented on the topic on the post, what is actually boredom? Because it's this, I guess boredom is kind of a dissatisfaction or a discomfort with either inactivity, or traditionally it was about doing repetitive tasks. It basically comes from the word bore, to bore, which was basically the job of putting holes in things with the old style drill and bit, which was basically a hand process of turning a handle and pushing down on something, slowly boring a hole down through timber, which was a necessary part of building things. Building ships, building houses, and everything that used wooden construction involved generally boring these holes through things, which was quite labour intensive and very mind numbing. There wasn't a lot of inspiration in the job, and so that's where boring comes from. And someone who is a bore, it was kind of like, if you're talking to someone who was a bore, it was kind of like that idea of just slowly turning the handle and watching the bit, chips very, very slowly through a big piece of wood. That was boring. And then boredom rose from that sometime later as an extension of that concept. I always like digging into the etymology of words. But, for me it was more around that childhood thing of, oh, this is boring, in being this, whatever we're doing is not inspiring anymore. And as I shared a little in that post that I put in, that bit of written content that I put up, as a child, I was quite satisfied in not doing a lot, in states of being. But what I noticed is my friends, people who I was with, would be, complaining of boredom if they weren't being entertained in some way, if there wasn't something new happening, and so this societal expectation, which I think is becoming more and more, prevalent today. Kids are probably even less likely to be satisfied with simple activities. Knocking a ball against a wall like we used to do for hours. I wasn't particularly into that because I didn't have the hand-eye coordination to feel particularly inspired by that. I'd much rather climb up a tree and sit there watching birds interact with each other. But that same idea of not actually having a lot of entertainment or what's the other word that I'm looking for? Not so much inspiration, but interaction with something. Not to have a lot of that excitement to keep us entertained, and to quickly default to the judgment that this is boring and therefore make it wrong and therefore want something else and therefore suffer through the experience. But for me, I think, society that's craving after these levels of entertainment is, we're robbing people of the opportunity to simply be in states of beingness. When you travel to other parts of the world, and I remember traveling through India and Asia for that matter, and just being completely amazed by the number of people doing absolutely nothing. And while that might sound like an absolute criticism, I wasn't amazed in a critical way. I was well impressed that people could just spend hours sitting together or squatting. Quite often you'll see a group of men in India just squatting along the side of the road, doing pretty much nothing. It's not like they're deep in conversation or anything like that. They're just watching the world go by. They're just watching time tick in states of being. And while you might think, oh wow, what a waste of a life, really? Is it? There's this kind of this story, or it's supposed to be almost a joke, but it's not really. It's a story around. I'll use the Indian. It doesn't need to be India, so let's leave India alone. So there's this man living under a bridge, right? It doesn't matter what country we're in. Basically subsiding on very meager means, homeless, living under a bridge, always finding enough food to eat and being relatively happy with their situation. Relatively happy, living under a bridge on the side of a river, enough food to eat, feeling enough shelter, not in any particular hardship. And then a younger man comes along who's made it in the world and has money and says, my friend, you should fish here and get some extra fish and sell them. Then you could get some money. And the man said, for what do I need money? And said, well, the younger man said, well, then you could buy a better fishing rod and you could, catch more fish. And he said, well, why would I want to do that? And he said, well, then you could buy a net, right? And then you could catch even more fish. And he said, well, why would I want that? Well, then you could employ someone. You'd have enough money to get someone to help you do this work. And well, why would I want to do that? Well, then you could afford to maybe get a boat and the two of you could go out and catch even more fish. And he said, and why? Well, then, right, then you could have two men do that work and you could live an easy life. And the old man said, a life like I'm living right now. Right? A life like I'm living right now. I could do all of this work so that I could earn a life of ease. But I'm already living that life of ease right now. Because I just get the one fish that I need and I'm happy to eat that, and it doesn't take much of my time. This is it. What have we bought into in our lives where we think that working so hard to get ahead? Why are we trying to get ahead? What is ahead? What are we working towards? What end goal, retirement, security are we looking for in life? by doing all of this hard work to build an empire or build a nest egg, and I'm not making it wrong. I'm not making earning money and getting a house and getting buying goods and services that we enjoy, but just tune in every now and again and understand what's your end goal, and can you perhaps take some shortcuts to getting there? Because a lot of what society is doing, they're doing because they've been trained to think that they should. That this is the path to happiness, that acquiring goods and status and this idea of security, money in the bank or investments, is the pathway to happiness. And it isn't. Lots of people have gone down that path and achieved everything that they were supposed to and still didn't find their happiness. Of course, some people did, but some people didn't. And other people who haven't gone down that path and haven't achieved all of the things that we are supposed to have chosen their happiness anyway. Happiness is a choice. And so no matter what path you are taking, whether you are driven by an ambition to acquire things, I'm not making that wrong at all, but if you are driven by that ambition, can you be happy while you are doing so and not transferring your happiness into the future outcome that you think when you think you have earned your happiness? And if you're choosing not to partake in the activity of acquiring more and more things, are you happy right now in where you are? And because that's all that matters, right? Can we find our happiness? And I think a lot of us have an option to balance our life a little more by bringing in some inactivity, some moments of stillness, some opportunity to really inquire more deeply into a state of beingness that we miss when we're so busy running from one activity to the next activity to the next activity, chasing either success or chasing our happiness through stimulation, right? Out there doing the activities that we playing our sports. Nothing wrong with playing sports. Nothing wrong with having pastimes. If you want to go skiing, whether that's snow skiing or water skiing, doesn't matter. If that brings you happiness and enjoyment, then do it. But can you be happy when you're not doing those things as well? It's all very well to enjoy these more intense experiences, great. But we all know that we can't sustain, most of us can't sustain a life of intense experiences one after the next after the next. So it's valuable to be able to be happy in other moments as well. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. Here, as I float in that lagoon behind me, watching the fish go about their business and then getting out of the water and lying on the beach for some time, and then thinking, well, I have an appointment at 2, I better get to that, and then thinking, well, now maybe we'll have something to eat, and looking what we've got to do, but not being overly concerned with a lot of shoulds, and not being overly concerned with what's next, and not planning out a big day of achievement. Yeah, I'm doing a bit of exercise. I've got a couple of different walks that we do here over the thing and climb some hills and get up a bit of a sweat and get the heart rate going because I enjoy that. Not because I should, not because I have to, not because that's a pathway to success, not because that's going to make me more likable, lovable, or appreciated by others, but just because that feels like a joyful thing to do. And it's not easy. It's not easy to put myself first and choose what's enjoyable. But ultimately I'm realizing that in putting myself first, I'm actually serving the world more than I could by sacrificing myself. And that's been a long lesson to learn, and I'm still learning it, right? It's been a long inquiry in that direction. What questions have ye? I'm basically just just expressing at the moment, waiting for some inspiration to take me in a different direction, or potentially take me deeper in the same direction. Very happy to dance with any questions that you might have from the floor. Because that's what I've chosen to do. I've put this little time in my calendar, and I choose to show up each week at this time, because generally I get a lot out of it. I get a huge amount out of it. You know, I've talked before how this is kind of my therapy. It's kind of a bit weird, to be honest, especially when there's not much happening on the side of the screen with comments coming up. I'm basically sitting here looking at a mirror image of myself, having these conversations, potentially to an audience, because I can see up the top there are a few people here. At the moment it tells me there's 3 people watching this live, and I know many people watch it in as a recording, in replay or whatever, but it still basically feels like I'm talking to myself. So I'm having my own little therapy session here where I talk about what I've been thinking about, which is valid, right? I do find it quite amazing how powerful it is to verbally express our thoughts out loud. It's powerful to write them down as well. That has a power to it. Journaling and writing has a power. Look, some people walk past. We don't see a lot of people walk past here. It's amazing. We're living in paradise, and yet we're so spread out here. The island's pretty much at capacity for tourists right now. It's really ramped up. When we first got here, it was quiet. Even for the locals, they were still very quiet, although they were waking back up after 15 months of lockdown, of having no tourists at all on the place. And that was pretty exciting for them in June. But now the island is pretty much ramped up to capacity in terms of beds. There's still some rooms available, I believe, but it's very much got very busy very quickly, and yet it's still like you don't see a lot of tourists around. So that's kind of neat, that we're having this experience here and it's still very, very quiet, which is why people come here. So anywho, where was I going? Therapy here. Yes, the power of speaking things out, telling someone, even if it's yourself. But you know, if you can get an audience together, if it's one other person, and tell them about what's going on for you, tell them your dreams, tell them something a little bit revealing, a little bit transparent, a little bit intimate, a little bit vulnerable, about your experience or your understanding or your dreams, your aspirations, your processing, is really powerful. It's really powerful. When we're willing to express our stuff to someone else, it makes it so much more real for ourselves, and that's important, because so often I think we're dance in a space where we don't even believe our life is real, and you know, to some degree it's not real. Sometimes we make things overly real in our head, and then other times we believe we're just imagining the whole thing. Especially our dreams, you know, a lot of times we're very scared to express our dreams for the risk of the fact that if we express it to someone else, then we're sort of held accountable, and that could be very disappointing for us if they don't happen. So it is valuable to be willing to express things, to write things down, to publish things. Very, very valuable, and not something to belittle. So yeah, if you get the chance, if you find the courage, then be willing to tell people about how you're feeling in an empowered way. Be willing to express yourself. Be willing to talk about your dreams and your aspirations. Be willing to talk about what you perceive are challenges on the planet or challenges in your own life. Not in a whingy, whiny sort of desperate way, but in a, you know, not needing to hide the fact that there are problems and challenges, and bring some empowerment to that process. You know, talking about our fears is valid. You know, talking about our pain is valid. Can we do it? Not necessarily, you know, when I say in an empowered way, I'm not, you know, You know, don't need to be Superman about it. It's not that it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. Um, but we talk about it in a way where we're owning it, where we're taking, you know, an empowered way of dealing with our pain is taking responsibility for it, not expecting someone else to fix our pain, but just in the process of expressing it, it can be a very cathartic experience. It can be a very releasing. It can be a very empowering experience, especially if we choose people well, who we express to and with, people who do have the capacity to hear us and to hold space. And when we get the opportunity to do the same for another, it's a beautiful experience as well. Holding space, allowing others to express without trying to necessarily fix it, without being judgmental, without saying, "Oh, don't worry about that." No, worry about that if that's what's worrying them. But worry about it, quote unquote, not in an anxiety loopy sort of way, but in a way that we bring that we desire to make a difference. We desire to make change. You know, apply energy to the problem. When I mean worry about something, you know, make it real enough that you're willing to take action. That's the sort of worry I mean, you know, as opposed to anxious thoughts looping through your head and you take no action at all. That's not a great form of caring about something. That level of worry isn't very empowered. What else, friends? I'm just clicking on here to see how long I've been talking. 21:21. Interesting time to press the button. Always good to see repetitive numbers. 21's a very magical number as well. Anywho, what else? Because it's made up of 2 and 1 and it adds up to 3. So it's the singular, the relationship, and 3 being the Trinity. 21 contains it all. Root expression of the Trinity, the singular, the relation, and the collection. What else? Anything else? I have had, as far as I can tell, I haven't had much input or request to go anywhere other than my own rantings and ravings. Just enjoying being with you in your beautiful setting. Awesome. So that's valid if I can bring that into your life, Jane. Thank you very much. I'm glad you get to enjoy. It is beautiful here. It's quite windy today. I was supposed to, quote unquote, I had in my calendar this morning that I was going to teach my yoga class and my relaxation, but it's a little bit windy. We get mic problems, and I can teach a yoga class with this mic on a cord, but I'm pretty uncoordinated and I tend to get tangled in the cord when I try and do that. And then when you're doing things like down dog, you end up with the microphone sort of falls right up into your face, and then so it's not great. I'd much prefer to have the mic on the side of my phone I've got a fluffy for it that protects it from the wind, but it won't cope with this level of wind. So I've postponed my teaching my yoga class and intending for tomorrow to bring better weather, so that I can find a awesome location to video my yoga class and keep our yoga community well entertained and maybe a little bit jealous that they're not here, because most of them are in New Zealand. Of course, it is an international community, but most are left over from the yoga studio that Marie and I ran on the Kapiti coast in New Zealand, and it's been fucking abysmal weather there, freezing. My mate Tim this morning commented on a post that I put up, and he said, "I've just got to go to work now. I've got to scrape the ice off the windscreen first," which is not a super common occurrence on the Kapiti. I know some of you listening to this are from Canada and places like that where scraping the ice is the least of your worries. You get like minus 40 and crazy weather like that. We don't get that. We get like -2 overnight, and that's bad enough on the Kapiti coast, because well, it's what you're used to, isn't it? It's what your house is built for. It's what your wardrobe's ready for. And what they do get in Wellington is very cold, wet wind that blows up off the southern Alps of New Zealand, basically coming from Antarctica. And it's very cutting and very unpleasant. And we're missing out on that. Living here, where I can talk about the problems with the wind, but the wind is basically 26 degrees Celsius, and I'm sitting here in t-shirt and shorts, as I have been now for 7 weeks of being here. I haven't once put on anything more than t-shirt and shorts, or a collared shirt and shorts. That's it. It's a different way of living in the tropics, where it's 25 degrees at night and 26 degrees during the day. Pretty much. We do get some colder weather where it has gone down to like 22 or so, and we have had some rain. Patricia wrote, interesting how siblings can be bored or engaged with the same situation. I was always happy with my own company. My sister needed to be entertained. Yeah. I always find it interesting how siblings are so different. Our two boys are only 18 months apart, but 18 months is basically also polar opposites on the zodiac. Not that I'm a massive astrology head, but regardless of where they are on the zodiac, they are chalk and cheese, my two boys. And while there are some similarities, of course, due to their shared history, in terms of constitution and energetic makeup, they are very, very much different. And their way of dealing with the world, their emotional states of being, their way of mentalizing, again, completely different. So while they have the commonality in the environment with which they were raised, and the same parents, the same household, very similar friends because they're so similar in ages. They knocked around with the same group of people through school. They are completely different in how they deal with the world, in their energetic sensitivities, in their strengths and their weaknesses. So it is very, very interesting. Blood is thick, but it doesn't in any way mean that things have to be super common. So yeah, it is very interesting. Very interesting. Anything else, friends? Before I disappear into the rest of my day. Breakfast is next for me. It's 11:30 here. I tend to eat around this time of day, between 11 and 12, and then again at 3 o'clock-ish. Have a bit of a salad, maybe a roll-up. Maybe we've found some nice flatbreads here. We also bought some rice paper, those Vietnamese rice wraps. I'm getting a bit sick of those, to be honest. They're nice. It's a different way of eating salad when you roll it up in something, and especially if you put it with hummus or pesto or something. But I've sort of got a bit of a hankering for the more bready ones now. So we found some rotis in one of the shops here that we heat up in the pan and then put our salad in and roll it up. That's very nice. And then we cook something interesting for dinner, or we go out. Last night we went out and we found a great place that does a veggie burger, and they do really good hot chips. So it's always nice to find a place like that, and it's not too expensive either. So that was our treat last night. Had burger and chips. Out, especially going out too, because you get to interact with and watch and the locals, because the locals were eating there too. It wasn't just a place for tourists. A big group of locals had come in, and they were ordering, and what they were ordering and how they were interacting with each other, and the dynamics. It's interesting, right? It's interesting to watch other cultures. I find that very stimulating. Talk of entertainment, as opposed to always just being at home with Marie, with very little else, no children around, and not having the same interactions with others who would habitually be in our life if we were back home in New Zealand. There's very little to dilute it here. So we can go for days with going out or being apart very much. You know, we do our walks, we swim or kayak or snorkel, make uh, th- uh, make our meals. Yeah, they are welcoming to tourists. They're very happy to have tourists back because it's a huge part of their economy here. Like over 85% of the economy of Aitataki is based on tourism. Um, yeah, because they used to export oranges, bananas, and something else, taro or something like that, one of their more native crops. Back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that was their main um, input into the economy. And since then, that has died away and is non-existent now. There's no citrus orchards here. They grow bananas here, but they don't export them anymore. They don't export anything. They um, well, they export a few things just to Rarotonga, which is the main island of the Cook Islands here from Aitataki, but very little. They export some fish that they catch, and when I mean export, like they put it on the plane, basically um, backloading the majority of stuff that arrives. They backload some fish and some of the veggies that they grow here, some of the root veggies, the traditional veggies mainly. And the lady who has a hydroponics set up here on the island also exports some of her lettuce and cucumbers. So yes, they are welcoming of tourists. The people here are very friendly in general, and very easygoing. You know, when we go anywhere on the scooter, everyone waves or nods, you know, to each other, the locals to each other and to us as well. The only people who don't quite often acknowledge us are other tourists. But even then, anyone who's been here for any length of time, anything more than a few days, soon gets into the habit of just acknowledging each other as you go past. And every time you walk into the shop, the shop owner is very welcoming, and other people in the shop say hello, and yeah, it's a lovely place to be. It's very much feels community orientated here. I think small islands tend to do that, so it's quite refreshing. It's quite refreshing to have that level of community interaction. Whereas at home, you know, you walk into the supermarket and, you know, you're just another number going about your day. And unless you have a specific relationship that's been built up over time, you don't tend to react so much to other people in the shops. You know, sometimes you do. I tend to go out of my way sometimes and smile and acknowledge other people, and share a moment, but that can be taken not always in good ways. Anyway, so yeah, it is very refreshing being here. It has been for me a breath of fresh air, and at the same time it's been quite challenging because there's been a lot of time for introspection, and in that time quite a lot of my deeper, darker stuff, you know, the stuff, my emotional discordance has been arising to process it in a deeper way that has not always been comfortable. It hasn't always been comfortable, but is nonetheless beneficial, and it's just a matter of maintaining an empowered attitude to that process and being willing to make the most of this opportunity to be still and to be with some of these pain points that we're carrying from the past, and allow that those releases. Anyway, friends, I'm sure that has been over my half-hour quota. Yeah, 33 minutes. So we'll probably say goodbye there. And we'll speak to you again soon. If not before, I'll be back this same time next week. Much love. Namaste. Bye for now.